Now that he was dead, Paul could look at him. The cop looked like a big doll that has been badly treated by a gang of nasty children. Welcome to AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we talk all things audiobooks. And we start with the quote of the week. This one was pretty interesting choice for my side. It's by Stephen King, and it's from the novel Misery, which happens to be the book of the month. But so many quotable moments in this book, and some of them just because they paint that picture. The power of simple similes. It takes me back to, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 grammar, similes and metaphors. But the power that Stephen King captures by just a simple painted picture, this gruesome portrait of this dead body. And the way that we know exactly what he's talking about just from that one sentence, it stands for itself. No other context, no other content needed. It's a story, and he tells it very well. I hope I told it very well, too. I'm Ramia Amuddin, the host of the show, and joining me on the intro segment is Nisreen Abdelmajid. But before we get to you, Niz, I want to tell people what's to be found on the CELA homepage. This is the Center for Equitable Library Access, and you can find it by visiting celalibrary.ca. The 3 featured titles up there today are Into the Broken Lands by Tanya Huff, and this is a fantasy title. The second one up there is Spare by the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, memoir. I don't know why I hesitated with Prince Harry's name. We all seem to know him. And Poster Girl is the final one up there by Veronica Roth, and this is a science fiction. You can go to celalibrary.ca for lots of other titles. Their catalog is never ending of audiobooks in human narrated audio as well as synth audio. Now, as promised, let's talk about what's trending. Nisreen, over to you.
So we're going to talk about the phone carrier T-Mobile, and they are offering gifts and other freebies to its customers as a mark of gratitude for choosing its services over others. The campaign is called It's Good That You Are. And this week, there is something that the bookworms will really appreciate. So now they are offering free access to audiobooks from BookBeat for a period of 60 days. That would mean thousands of audiobooks for you to listen to completely for free. The coupon, though, was only there for the taking till January 25th. But, Ramya, I wanted to still ask you, would this amazing offer convince you enough to try out another carrier?
Good question. Okay, because I'm so set in my ways, my heels are already dug in on the apps and the things that I use. Like audiobook listening is so second nature, right? I know what to do when I pop in my AirPods and where to go. I don't think that this is catered to me, but other people, maybe even people as yourself, Nisreen, who are newer to audiobook listening or still kind of wondering what the best game plan is for audiobook listening regularly, I think that this is a great way to get into it. Nice marketing.
Yeah, that I know some of them are such they're really good offers. This just reminded me of a visit that I had today from like somebody doing door to door from Rogers, and they were trying to convince us to go with them, obviously, and they were giving us better deals and things like that. So I was just thinking about that, but for me, I don't think it would convince me enough to go with another carrier because it's, kind of back and forth. There's always going to be marketing deals. There's always going to be some promotions of some sort for each carrier. And second thing is, I'm just completely lazy to go through that process. So I think that sums it up pretty well.
Okay, no, but that's a fair point, though, because I agree with you. That's exactly what I said, right? In a roundabout way. Like, I'm not going to switch everything I know already and use already to this brand spanking shiny new offer. But that's just coming from, like, the perspective of someone who's already so dug deep into their habits. But if you're new and, you found out about this and this is what's making you want to listen to audiobooks, then that's perfect. Jump on it, because we need more audiobook listeners. Now, where did you say the coupons are for? Like, do they give you specific coupons for?
So The coupon was there for the taking till January 25th,
Mm.
starting from then to for 60 days. So I think the coupon is over, but
And is it for Audible or for audiobooks.com, or just they'll let you know when you sign up?
so it's from BookBeat.
BookBeat, got
And
it.
if, yeah, so they're now offering free access to audiobooks from BookBeat for a period
Okay.
of 60 days. So if you already got this offer, this coupon, knock yourselves out for 60 days. You have
Yes.
completely free audiobooks.
And check out BookBeat because that sounds kind of like a fresh name in the
Yeah.
audiobook world. Awesomeness. Thanks. That is what's trending. On today's episode of AMI Audiobook Review, we revisit with Aamer Khan, and he says inspiration is everything. He's highlighting 3 authors, their popular works, and their background experiences and expertise that seep into the writing of these works. This is AMI Audiobook Review. This is AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we chat all things audiobooks. And once a month, near the end of the month, we check in with Aamer Khan. He's an audiobook worm, and he returns at the time of the hour to tell us all about his reads for the month. We get to the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's all bound to come out. And as we kick off the year, yes, it's still January, so we will throw that around for the rest of the month. Here's an introductory poem by Aamer Khan. In 2023, we're going to pick 3. Rather than be stuck in reverie, we're choosing quality over quantity. We'll try to stay within the line of 3 authors at a time. But if we don't, we'll still be just fine. Woohoo! That's our first poem of the year. Aamer, welcome back.
Great to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and happy to read a poem by you as well, always. Let's talk about this. I want to say you pick 3, but you have literally picked 3. So we're talking authors this time around. Who's the first one?
First author we have up is Aamer Khan. She, if you recall, that was part of a pause and play back in December, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
as well as on the Stila homepage for quite some time. And this was listed as a police procedure. Looked like it had some race themes to it, but it's so much more. So I did a bit more of a deep dive into the author and to see what the author's sort of qualifications and background is. And I was really surprised and not surprised at the same time, especially after reading the book. So I did read Blackwater Falls. It's a fantastic read. It touches on so many serious themes in a fictional novel. It's one of these standout novels, which I would recommend to people if they're really interested in, picking up a book that's a little bit different, that have to do with identity and religion and race and civil rights and all these types of things. From the synopsis, the main character is a female Muslim detective who has moved from Chicago to Colorado. And she's part of what they call community policing now, which has to do with race relations in the city. And her job is basically to solve the murders of minority girls that are turning up dead. So there's a lot in terms of unpacking in terms of her own character, as well as the character of the victim, as well as the sort of landscape of the community and all of those things where they intersect. And it's very modern. It's very sort of right now type of book in terms of themes of defunding the police and how people are reacting to different situations and all those types of sort of heavy duty themes without dragging the user down into depression or without any sort of hope.
How does that happen? Because it's true, when you're talking about the things that are being discussed, the overarching themes, it sounds very, very serious. But how does she manage not to make us feel sad about it?
I think through the characters, right? I mean, if you have all these characters that are just always depressing, then it's going to take the reader down too. But I think there are characters who have positive things going on for them, and who generally want to make an impact, including the main character, in terms of trying to make things better and actually having some traction to do that.
Mm.
So it looks like it's the first book in a series. I'm really looking forward to seeing the second book come out. As I was sort of alluding to earlier, I did take a look at the author herself. And no surprise, she's very well educated. The surprise for me was that she's actually Canadian.
Oh,
and that her she has a law degree. She actually practiced law when she lived in Toronto, I believe,
okay.
immigration law. But she also has a PhD in themes like military and war crimes, and those sort of intersections, which do appear in her books in terms of those pieces. So she was also the editor in chief of Muslim Girl magazine when it was being distributed. It's no longer being distributed, but so in terms of education and background, she's got a lot in terms of experience. She also taught law at various universities in Canada before moving away, and so it's no surprise her books are sort of content rich in those particular areas.
Now, you and I have had countless debrief and review sessions after reading books together. And it's in the kindest way possible. You can really shred a book apart. So I'm curious about, knowing what this author has in her pockets in terms of background and knowledge base, and then the kind of things that she's discussing in the book. Do you find that there's a lot of her in the book, her expertise?
I think so, and not in a bad way. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, I think the books are very well tempered in terms of being a good storytelling without trying to sort of force feed somebody a theme. I think the books are about these particular topics, but there's no sense of, like we're just going to talk about this one thing and we're just going to beat it to death the whole book.
Okay.
It's you don't get that sense at all. There's like I said, a lot of different dimensions to all the different characters. Her boss is also somebody who's interesting because he was sort of raised Muslim, but he lost his way sort of from a his faith along the way. So he's also an interesting character in terms of he's a very sort of typical hard-nosed detective, but he's also responsible for his twin brothers. So he's sort of a father figure as well. So he sort of has to struggle with faith in those terms as well. So a lot of different layers and dimensions, and a very sort of different book than her first book, which I'll talk about next, which is named The Unquiet Dead. The Unquiet Dead is another great novel if you want to get into these types of heavier themes. Again, I'll put up the sort of standard warnings I have if you can't deal with things like war crimes and these types of situations, then you probably want to stay away from this book. It is fairly graphic, but
Mm.
the interesting parts of this book is that number one, it's set in Scarborough, so that's where I grew up. So I thought that was really cool.
Represent.
The basic premise of the book is that somebody has fallen off the Scarborough Bluffs, but nobody really knows if somebody was pushed or the person jumped or the person slipped or what happened. So
Wow.
it's again another detective story, but what slowly comes to light is that this person may or may not have been a Bosnian war criminal. Um, and sort of the whole book is about that mystery, but it's also about that conflict. It's also about the people who have been through it. No surprise, the author has actually studied that particular conflict. And there's a lot in there to unpack, again, in terms of identity, in terms of what is more morally acceptable and what it's
Mm.
not. How do you deal with more political pieces as well in terms of, again, it's set in Canada. So if this person was allowed to be in Canada, whose responsibility was it to, do that deep dive and find out who he was or who we think he is, and whether, what to do about those types of situations. So again, very different books from your average detective story or average sort of novel. Again, very heavy themes, but I really enjoy these novels and look forward to reading more. The last interesting point I'll put for her books is that she also has a fantasy series. So that was very surprising to me. A lot of authors do go into different genres, but I find myself hesitating quite a bit to try the fantasy novels after reading such great sort of serious fiction novels. So
Mm-hmm.
if I do give the fantasy novels a try, I'll probably wait a
Did,
bit longer before getting into them.
did you check out the synopsis?
I did.
Okay.
I yeah.
Still? Still
No,
hesitant? Okay.
no, and more from the content. I'm like, oh, this stuff sounds great, and then like knowing who the author is and trying to get my head
Yeah.
into that. No, I'm like, no, I can't do it.
I often wonder and inquire about why people do pen names, authors with pen names and different series that way. But in this case, I almost immediately went, why not a pen name? But okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
especially since they're so serious, right? I mean, somebody like Jonathan Mayberry, went from sort of martial arts writing to monster books,
Mm,
which isn't such a big leap if you think about it. So, but his publishers were like, "Oh, do a pen name because it might not work or
yep.
whatever." But when it comes to completely different genres, I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would be hesitant. Remind us again, where did Blackwater Falls take place compared to the second one?
Colorado,
Colorado. Okay, got you.
yeah, Colorado. So it does take place in the States. The Unquiet Dead takes place in Scarborough, so
Mm-hmm.
it's much more of a Canadian theme. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the second author. Who's this one?
Author number 2 is Nita Prose. I did not look into her background at all, but I thoroughly enjoyed her book. It's called The Maid. It's important to remember the author because there's about a dozen books that are called The Maid,
Right.
including a Netflix series right now with The Maid. So this is completely
Totally
different,
different.
totally different. But I really enjoyed this book. It's written from a first-person perspective of somebody with diminished capacity. I read a few books the year before last with regards to people who are on the spectrum, who have autism. Um, but in this particular book, they don't actually say she what her actual condition is. It's just told from her perspective. And the book is primarily about a maid that has gotten a job at a fancy hotel through her grandmother's connections, who the grandmother is raising her because her parents are no longer alive, and her grandmother passes away, and she is basically going about her business in terms of you know uh, living her day-to-day life, but she ends up finding a dead person in uh, one of the hotel rooms she's cleaning, and the mystery starts to unfold in terms of from there, in terms of who might have done it and how they might have done it, and sort of the trouble she sort of gets in with regards to that. um, like I said, very heartwarming, very touching story. I think I've alluded to this before with some of the authors, in terms of endings. Sometimes I really wish authors would just quit while they're ahead in a lot of cases. And I had a tinge of that with this particular book, where I think for me personally, the entire epilogue at the end was completely unnecessary.
Mm,
Even to a point, even a little bit before the epilogue, I was like, okay, well, that's fine. And I think authors try to do things that are a little bit different than other people, and sometimes they step out of the own framework of their particular book. So, in my opinion, this book is definitely a book about diminished capacity and that sort of heartwarming, touching story. And towards the end, you start to see the author sort of stepping out of that. And at least for myself, I didn't get anything out of that. I mean, it may have separated the book out from others, but
sure.
yeah.
To challenge it a little bit, though, curious as to if you can tell what that would have lent another reader, even if for you personally it wasn't necessarily
Yeah, I
doable.
mean, I think most readers would be able to catch that. I mean, the book sort of goes a certain way the entire book in terms of theme, in terms of the way it's written, and then at the end it sort of takes that left turn. And it's not enough to criticize and say that it's a bad ending, and it's certainly not enough where you say, well, that's completely out of left field. But I think most people would agree that that's a departure from what the sort of essence of the novel was up to that point.
Okay. Now, the book itself, have you read anything? Sometimes when I read a book, I think, oh, this kind of totally reminds me of this other book. Did you have feelings of that?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, like I said a couple of years ago, I did read some other books about diminished capacity. The names are escaping me, but definitely have read things that were similar, and those have come up in the more recent years. I believe one was more on the romance side. Actually, both were more on the romance side. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, because at times I wonder, this the old question of is this book gonna make it? And I think that
Yeah.
things trend, right? Like YA as a genre seems to be trending a lot more than usual the last couple of years and things like that. So I wonder, if it's catered to popularization or just because it's a very deep and interesting and important topic. Is
I
it
think
relatable?
for this particular book, I think it's because it's A, relatable, and B, because it's just written so well.
Mm,
It sort of reminds me, one of the books that comes to mind from this particular genre was the Girl I Used to Know. I forget the author's name, but it's something I reviewed earlier, which again has to do with sort of diminished capacity and somebody who's on the spectrum trying to make it through life.
right.
Um, and that book actually coincidentally had an entire ending that was tacked on, and again, from my opinion, almost unnecessary. But you could tell from when you read the ending that the author had that ending in mind from the beginning. So
Mm,
yeah, and I believe Helen Hong is another is the other author I'm thinking about in terms of writing about people on the spectrum.
right, right. Yeah, and sometimes it's just, a story is so unique or so unheard of, at least for the reader's exposure, that alone is something that could carry you on, right? Let's get to the final author, pick number 3. I think it's one of your favorite authors. Is that fair to say?
Right now, yes.
Okay, great.
Uh, and just to go just the last bit on the on the Maid by Nita Prose
Hmm.
is that I think I really like the book because it really reminds everyone of their responsibility to people who uh, who have diminished capacity. Um, I think for me that's what I get out of these novels the most in terms of what, as a society, we have a responsibility to look out for each other and prevent things like people taking advantage of other people in that most egregious of ways. So.
Hmm.
Um, but getting on to the Harry Bosch series, the Harry Bosch series is written by Michael Connolly, and I reviewed one of his books quite some time ago called The Poet, which was a bit more of a really dark, almost gruesome detective book. And that is part of another series, the Jack McAvoy series, I believe it is. But I picked up the Harry Bosch series and absolutely loved it. It's a very sort of typical detective story, but Michael Connolly, in terms of his background, he was a Los Angeles Times reporter for many, many years. Very unsurprisingly, his particular area was crime stories. So he was on the crime beat for many years, and it definitely shows. I don't know how many Harry Bosch books there are, but I believe there are more than 20. He also has a Amazon Prime series for Harry Bosch. More recently and more popular, I believe, is the Lincoln Lawyer series, which I believe are both on the small screen as well as books. But he's definitely a big name. Definitely lots of books that he's written over the years. The Harry Bosch series sort of starts in the late 80s, I believe. So it's kind of interesting to read the books and see the progression of technology from, everybody having to make phone calls from their home or from the office to, they have flip phones and then now they have computers and, like
Oof.
these. So it's sort of a walk down memory lane to a lot of degree, but and of course, these most of these stories are set in the Los Angeles area. I'm on book 12, I think, of the series already,
How many are
and
there?
over 20, I believe.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I think my favorite line so far is from the book I'm reading. I've just finished recently, and it says something to the effect of, it was once said that LA is a sunny city for shady people. So
Mm.
uh,
Mm-mm. I love
the
it.
books definitely reflect that. There's lots of sunny people. There's a lot of shady people. There's a lot of murder, and in the middle you have Harry Bosch, who's trying to keep everything sort of fair. But it's not easy in a town like that. So
Mm. A lot of emotion.
a lot of emotion, and that's what makes the books different. There's a lot of emotions that Harry carries around and has to deal with in terms of fairness. Themes of police corruption and those types of things really make themselves known in the books as well. The author, because he's a reporter, has a lot of background in terms of events that have shaped the LAPD and America in general. So there's lots of references, and he talks about the emotional and societal impact of things like the Rodney King incident, the Watts riots, and all those sort of race relations, in addition to other pieces which have affected sort of the psyche of Los Angeles over time.
That is very fascinating. I think that you've picked a quite a variety of authors here. There might be some, common theme amongst the three of them, but great book choices and great backgrounds as well for those you've provided background for. Thank you so much, Aamer. We will catch you next month.
You're very welcome. Take care.
So the three authors we featured today, as we're going to start hopefully picking 3 a month, is Aamer Khan, Nina Prose, and Michael Connolly. Next week, we're back with our friends from the Center for Equitable Library Access talking reading goals, how to set them up, keep track of them, and, of course, how to keep an open mind while we go through the year of reading. That ends today's episode of AMI Audiobook Review, and until next time, happy audiobook listening.